agenda. The bill S-4430, Interagency Patent Coordination and Improvement Act of 2022, sponsored by myself, Senator Tillis, and co-sponsored by Senators Grassley, Leahy, and Coons. It's been listed for the first time, will be held over. Because of some attendance issues today, we'll also hold over two of our judicial nominees, Rachel Blumkatz for the Sixth Circuit and Anna Reyes for the D.C. District. I look forward to voting on their nominations next week. We will vote today on 10 nominees, 7 to the U.S. Sentencing Commission, 2 judicial nominees, and a nominee to head the Justice Department Office of Legislative Affairs. I want to make a few remarks about the Sentencing Commission and the slate. Criminal justice reform has always been a top priority of mine, and I want to thank Senator Grassley, Senator Booker, and so many others who have really focused on this issue, Senator Lee. I've worked together with a number of committee members on this issue to pass important bipartisan legislation like the Fair Sentencing Act and the First Step Act, which address sentencing issues. Unfortunately, important aspects of this legislation have not been realized. That's in no small part because the Sentencing Commission has not had a quorum for 3 years. With no quorum, the commission created in 1984, tasked by Congress to promote transparency and consistency in sentencing, has been unable to update the sentencing guidelines to provide guidance to judges. Today, we make an important step to rectify the situation. In doing so, we can enable the Commission to get back to its work, collecting, analyzing sentencing data, employing data-driven expertise to guide Congress in setting sentencing policy, and helping judges navigate the sentencing process. As I noted last week when we held over the Sentencing Commission nominees for the second time, this commission has long operated in a bipartisan manner, a reflection of the statutory mandate and its consensus-driven approach. I know that several members will ask today to be recorded in opposition to some of the commission nominees. I wish that were not the case, but it is every member's right to make that decision. I intend to vote in favor of all of them. I do have reservations about some, but I believe it's in the best interest of the Commission to keep this in a bipartisan spirit. Whatever issues any of us may have with an individual nominee, I hope we all agree the Commission needs a quorum, and this bipartisan slate of nominees is ready to get the Commission back up and running to perform its vital work. Senator Feinstein is asked to speak after Senator Grassley. Let me recognize Senator Grassley at this point.
Okay. I'm glad we're able to move forward on the Sentencing Commission and do it by voice vote. Since 2018, as the chairman said, the commission hasn't been able to amend the sentencing guidelines because it lacks the number of commissioners for a quorum. If these nominees are confirmed, they'll be able to do their work. Congress created the commission to promote transparency and improve federal sentencing. It's also tasked with providing information so that Congress can make evidence-based policy decisions about sentencing. Because it's a bipartisan agency, we won't all agree with the policy positions put forward by the members, but it's important that the Commission be able to get to work fixing the issues that have come up with the guidelines since 2018. Now to the judicial nominees, I'll be supporting Judge Haynes. I'll also be voting for Judge Pan to get report out of committee. I've got further study to do on her nomination before I decide how I would vote on the floor. I'll also vote no on the Office of Legislative Affairs nominee. I'm doing so because the Justice Department's failure to be responsive to our committee's oversight requests. I've discussed the department's failures many times at this very meeting. I've done the same on the Senate floor and very appropriately with the Attorney General. The department has failed to provide responsive letters and production to this committee. The department will also say that they've responded to our letters. You've heard me say before that that's not a very accurate way of, an honest way of saying that they have responded to our letters because they simply put words on a piece of paper. That's not responsiveness. Answering our questions, producing documents is way to measure responsiveness. Now, this is a bipartisan problem. When I say that, this is what I mean. Whether a Republican or Democrat is in charge of the Justice Department, that department has a history of failure, of being transparent to the United States Congress. I will not let up on congressional oversight. The public's business ought to be public. I owe it to the people of Iowa and maybe to the entire country to hold the executive branch accountable, and I'll continue that fight regardless of whether we have a Republican or Democrat in charge of it. I yield.
Thanks, Senator Grassley. Senator Feinstein?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you for holding yesterday's hearing to discuss the threat that assault weapons pose in our community. I cannot let this moment pass. I was the author of the assault weapons legislation, which was law for 10 years. I watched it closely and what happened, and it worked. And these weapons began to diminish in our society. Now you see youngsters with these weapons, and you see what they carry on the streets with these weapons. And I am very worried, really worried, about where we are going as a society. We're a great democratic country, and when to see youngsters with assault weapons out on the streets at midnight and using these weapons is just something I don't think we should abide. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. It was very powerful to see members of the Highland Park community in the audience lending their voices to the effort. The House Judiciary Committee voted 25-18 to approve the assault weapons ban they have before them today and send it to the House floor for a vote. This bill is a companion to the bill I have introduced in the Senate, which currently has 37 co-sponsors, and I'm very grateful to each and every one of them. In the wake of recent mass shootings in Buffalo, Uvalde, Highland Park, and Greenwood, it is clear that a federal ban on assault weapons is more necessary than ever. So, I hope the Senate is able to build on the work of the House and move forward in considering legislation to ban or limit the sale of assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. And I will be introducing that bill again. Anyone who would like to be a co-sponsor, I would welcome you. And we will fight the good fight once again.
Thank you, Senator Feinstein. Anyone else seeking recognition? Senator Cornyn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One important point I think needs to be made about an effort to ban so-called assault rifles. We heard yesterday that the fact that so-called assault rifles are nothing but a semi-automatic rifle. They have essentially the same mechanism as semi-automatic pistols and semi-automatic shotguns. So I think our Democratic friends and those who believe in an assault weapon ban ought to be honest. They're not going to stop at AR-15s. They seek to ban all semi-automatic weapons. And that would clearly, in my view, undermine the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens. At the same time, our Democratic friends have sat silent when an activist part of their political base has called for defunding the police and blaming law enforcement every time there is a encounter with people who are threatening to break the law. So I think our colleagues ought to be honest. They don't intend to stop at an assault weapon ban. This is an assault against all semi-automatic weapons at the very least, but also an attempt to undermine the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
I'll recognize just a moment. I want to respond if I might, because my wife asked me this morning. It wasn't clear to her after she listened to the hearing what we're talking about, automatic, semi-automatic, and so forth. Here's what I understand, and I'm certainly not an expert on firearms, but I've tried to read up on it, and that is that the difference between a semi-automatic and an automatic is whether or not holding the trigger continues to fire rounds. On a semi-automatic, you have to pull the trigger for each round. And on these AR-15s, they have a mechanism that puts another bullet in the chamber immediately. That's why they're so efficient. So the firing mechanism, as opposed to an automatic where you can hold the trigger and all the rounds fire that you have available, and the semi-automatic is clear. But there is a clear difference yesterday in the testimony about the impact of an AR-15. It is semi-automatic, but it has a capacity that it makes it a great weapon in combat. You heard the testimony from our expert that these bullets are discharged at 3 times the ordinary velocity. And the fact that they could pierce a helmet 500 yards away, I tried to even imagine that, is an indication of the power of that round coming out of that weapon. How frequently it comes out and whether you have to hold the trigger or pull it each time is the firing mechanism, but the capacity of that weapon to do damage to the human body is dramatic. It is much different than other firearms. So I think that is the distinction. As far as the notion that we sit back complacently and let those who were calling for defund the police go unchallenged, that's just plain wrong. The first time I was greeted with that chant on a radio program, I said I rejected it on its face. It made no sense. When I dial 911, if God forbid I ever do, I want good policing on the other end of the line. I have never been for defund the police, and I'm not going to be. I think that's a position that is held by virtually all of the Democrats. We are not slaves to those who would use that slogan, thinking clearly we want good policing, but we want to make sure it is well funded when it is good policing.
Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
are we going to have a hearing on the 800 people who were killed in Chicago last year?
If you'd like to have one on that, I think we all also have on those cities in red states that have a higher rate of gun violence death than the city of Chicago. That would include St. Louis and the city of Missouri, Jackson, Mississippi, for 2. If we want to deal with gun violence on the streets, I'm happy to hold that hearing.
I think that would be very, very helpful, and also the role of street gangs that are the network that distribute the drugs that come across the open border, the drugs that caused 108,000 Americans to lose their lives last year alone, and the connection between the Biden open border policies and the violence we're seeing in cities like Chicago and elsewhere by these street gangs who are fighting for territory and market share. I think that would be a good subject for a hearing.
I think we're going to find those street gangs, as awful as they are not unique to the city of Chicago. Senator Whitehouse?
Oh, Chairman, I just wanted to add, I hope and expect that I'm one of the Democratic friends of Senator Cornyn. I consider myself to be, in which case views have been ascribed to me that I do not hold and have never adopted, so lest silence be deemed consent, I wanted to just clarify the record.
Any others seeking recognition? Senator Thune?
Mr. Chairman, I too count myself as not just a colleague, but a friend of Senator Cornyn and also a friend and supporter of our president. So I just want to take a moment and emphasize 2 things briefly. The $350 billion in American Rescue Plan funds that were specifically made available to hire more police, and the speech that President Biden is giving today in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, to try and advance his $37 billion proposal, $13 billion of which would be dedicated to hiring another 100,000 police. The idea that this administration or that senators on this side of the aisle support defunding the police flies in the face of what is actually happening and what is actually being proposed. I respect my friend and colleague from Texas. I just could not stay silent given that the president is literally trying to advance proposals to fund police at the state and local level today.
If no one else seeks recognition, we'll return to the calendar. Before we turn to the Sentencing Commission, we have several judicial nominees. Judge Florence Pan to the D.C. Circuit, long tenure on the bench, experience litigating, graduate at the University of Pennsylvania and Stanford Law School, clerked on the Southern District of New York and the Second Circuit before spending her entire legal career in public service. advisor to the Treasury Department, assistant U.S. attorney in D.C., judge on the D.C. Superior Court from 2009 to 2021, confirmed to the D.C. District Court on a strong bipartisan vote of 68 to 30 last year, unanimously rated well qualified. Does anyone seek recognition to speak on her nomination? If not, on favorably reporting the nomination of Florence Pan to be U.S. Circuit Judge for the D.C. Circuit, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Leahy.
Aye by proxy.
Mrs. Feinstein. Aye. Mr. Whitehouse. Aye. Ms. Klobuchar. Aye. Mr. Coons.
Aye.
Mr. Blumenthal.
Aye.
Mr. Rono.
Aye.
Mr. Booker.
Aye.
Mr. Padilla.
Aye.
Mr. Ossoff. Mr. Grassley.
Aye.
Mr. Graham.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Cornyn.
No.
Mr. Lee.
No.
Mr. Cruz.
No by proxy.
Mr. Sass.
No by proxy.
Mr. Hawley.
No by proxy.
Mr. Cotton.
No by proxy.
Mr. Kennedy.
No by proxy.
Mr. Tillis.
No by proxy.
Mrs. Blackburn.
No by proxy.
Chair Durbin.
Aye.
Chair Durbin, the votes are 13 yeas, 9 nays.
And the nomination will be favorably reported to the floor. Next is the nomination of Judge Elizabeth Haynes, Eastern District of Virginia. Lengthy distinguished career in public service, attended the University of Richmond and the University of Richmond School of Law, clerk for Judge Goodwin on the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of West Virginia, and Robert King on the Fourth Circuit. Appointed to serve as magistrate judge on the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia. Issued more than 100 opinions, has never been reversed. Strong support of her home state senators, Warner and Kane, rated qualified, and I will support her. Anyone else seek recognition on Judge Haynes' nomination? On favorably reporting the nomination, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Leahy.
Aye by proxy.
Mrs. Feinstein. Aye. Mr. Whitehouse.
Aye.
Ms. Klobuchar. Aye. Mr. Coons.
Aye.
Mr. Blumenthal.
Aye.
Ms. Hirono. Aye. Mr. Booker.
Aye.
Mr. Padilla.
Aye.
Mr. Ossoff.
Aye.
Mr. Grassley.
Aye.
Mr. Graham.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Cornyn.
No.
Mr. Lee.
No.
Mr. Cruz.
No by proxy.
Mr. Sass.
No by proxy.
Mr. Hawley.
No by proxy.
Mr. Cotton.
No by proxy.
Mr. Kennedy.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Tillis.
Aye by proxy.
Mrs. Blackburn.
No by proxy.
Chair Durbin.
Aye.
Chair Durbin, the votes are 15 yeas, 7 nays.
Nomination will be favorably reported to the floor. Now, I understand we're going to turn to the Sentencing Commission, after members have had an opportunity to speak, seek an en-bloc voice vote. Of course, members who wish to be recorded no on any individual nominee will be so recorded, and we'll read out this list once we have taken the vote. And before we proceed, does anyone wish to speak to these Sentencing Commission nominees? Senator Ossoff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're considering these nominees for the U.S. Sentencing Commission. So I think it's appropriate for us to take stock of disparity in sentencing in the United States, a country where equal justice under the law is a core value proclaimed in founding documents, but where equal justice under the law is far from reality, where Black Americans continue to face disparate policing, prosecution, and sentencing throughout the criminal justice system. According to the most recently available data from the U.S. Sentencing Commission, Black male offenders received federal sentences that were 19% longer than similarly situated white male offenders from 2011 to 2016. Black offenders received longer average sentences for firearms offenses, carrying a mandatory minimum penalty than any other racial group. According to this Sentencing Commission, Black offenders convicted of a firearms offense carrying a mandatory minimum received longer average sentences than any other racial group. That's 165 months for Black offenders versus 140 for white. black offenders are consistently less likely to receive leniency in sentencing in the United States. Even when controlling for all other variables consistently in federal sentencing, black Americans are bearing the brunt of harsher and more extreme sentences with less access to leniency in our federal courts. And of course, this isn't just true at the federal level. Black Americans facing the criminal justice system at the state and local level are consistently facing harsher sentences, less leniency and understanding from the system. And so as we consider these nominees, I hope that we and they will redouble our commitments to making America, in fact, a place where there is equal justice under the law. I'm struck, representing the state of Georgia, Senator Durbin, that while this data is unequivocal and black Americans continue to receive harsher sentencing from the criminal justice system, when a young black man named Ahmaud Arbery was shot dead in broad daylight on camera in the street in Glenn County, Georgia, it took the NAACP and an unprecedented civil rights mobilization for local authorities even to look at the case. So I asked each of these nominees for their commitment in writing unequivocally that they would work to end disparity, racial disparity in sentencing in the United States. I got that unequivocal commitment from all but one. And I hope that we as the Judiciary Committee, whether we're Democrats or Republicans, and that every nominee, should they be confirmed to this commission, will make ending racial disparity in sentencing a core priority of their work. And with that, I yield.
Thank you, Senator Ossoff. Anyone else seek recognition? If not, we're going to proceed with an en bloc voice vote. So on favorably reporting the nominations of Carlton Reeves to be a member and chair of the U.S. Sentencing Commission, and Laura Mate, Clara McCusker Murray, Luis Felipe Restrepo, Claria Horn Boom, John Gleason, and Candace Wong to be members of the U.S. Sentencing Commission. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, no. The following members have been asked to be recorded as no on the following nominees. Bear with me.
All of them? Oh, he wants you to recognize him.
Let me read the list
I'm
and
sorry.
make sure it's right, and if it isn't, please
I didn't
speak
know
up
you had the
afterwards.
list.
On nominee Reeves, voting no are Lee, Cruz, Sass, Hawley, Kennedy, Blackburn. On Mate, this is Laura Mate, voting no are Lee, Cruz, Sass, Hawley, Kennedy, Blackburn. On Gleason, Lee, Cruz, Sass, Hawley, Kennedy, Blackburn. On Restrepo, Lee, Cruz, Sass, Hawley, Kennedy, Blackburn. On Murray, Whitehouse, Blumenthal. On Wong, Ossoff.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to be recorded as a no on Ms. Murray as well.
The record will so reflect. Are there any members that want to correct that list, or is it correct? The majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the ayes have it. The nominations will be reported to the floor, and all of the suggested votes that I read will be a part of the record. Finally, we have Carlos Uriarte, nominated to be Assistant Attorney General for Legislative Affairs at Justice. Extensive work. I didn't realize until I read closely on his resume that he had at one point been a law clerk to then Republican Chair Arlen Specter. I know many members of the committee on both sides of the aisle have been frustrated by the Justice Department's responsiveness on a host of oversight issues. I join that chorus. Mr. Uriarte, be prepared. We're going to confront you starting as soon as you are in office in this position with the concerns of this committee on our level of communications. Does anyone else seek recognition to speak on his nomination?
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Whitehouse.
just to emphasize what you have said, I will support Mr. Uriarte. I wish him well, but the department has a lot of explaining to do, and he's going to be the point person on it.
I'll join you in that. On favorably reporting the nomination of Carlos Felipe Uriarte to be Assistant AG for the Office of Legislative Affairs, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Leahy,
Aye by proxy.
Mrs. Feinstein. Mr. Whitehouse. Ms. Klobuchar. Blumenthal. Aye. Ms. Hirono. Mr. Booker.
Aye.
Mr. Padilla.
Aye.
Mr. Ossoff. Aye. Mr. Grassley.
No.
Mr. Graham.
I by proxy.
Mr. Corning.
No.
Mr. Lee.
No.
Mr. Cruz.
No by proxy.
Mr. Sass.
No by proxy.
Mr. Hawley.
No by proxy.
Mr. Cotton.